Good morning. You are welcome back to class. Yesterday we started learning about formatting. Today we want to move to another subtopic called data validation. So we are going to look at data validation today, and we are going to practice data validation. Now, someone will ask, what is data validation? If you look at the words here, you see data and you see validation. Now, when we say validation, what comes to mind when you hear validation? What comes to mind?
Something authentic.
To make something authentic. I think I like that. To make something authentic. That is extremely important, and Excel requires that your worksheet is authentic. So what is data validation? Data validation in Excel simply refers to the process of ensuring the validity or accuracy of data or values that users enter into cells by using the data validation tool. Today may be the very first time you are hearing anything about data validation, but this is one of the most important things in Excel. It is extremely important. You have to understand it and you have to apply it to your most important worksheets. The data validation tool is used to restrict cells to only allow or accept certain specific types of values that are entered by users. It also rejects wrong inputs and ensures that all values entered are valid. In short, the data validation tool allows you to control the type of data entered into your worksheet. For example, in cells that only numbers are required, the data validation tool can be used to restrict text or other characters from being entered. Now, let's say you have a company's report or a worksheet, a very important worksheet like this, and users are supposed to input data for very important calculations to be done. Now, over here, we are asking for figures or numbers. What will happen if someone comes here and instead of entering 130, or let me use this one, instead of entering 50, someone mistakenly types text 50. Now, by entering 50 into this cell, you have created a serious error in the calculation because 50 is not a number to be calculated, and all the cells and calculations that depend on the total here, because in Excel we connect various calculations, and various calculations depends on other calculations and other inputs. So if, let's say, a chart is depending on the figures here to plot the chart, do you know that by entering 50 here you have destroyed the entire chart? Because it will not know the value to use for the chart. And other calculations that depend on the results here will all be wrong. So what is data validation? Data validation is a tool we use to restrict inputs. You can use data validation to prevent anyone from entering text into this cell. If you don't have data validation, people can enter inputs even by mistake. And because of the mistake of one input, it destroys the entire worksheet. Because if you know how Excel works, Excel is very dynamic and depends on various calculations to perform other chain reactions to produce other results. And so if one thing goes wrong, a lot can go wrong. So data validation helps you to prevent all that. Data validation allows you to place restrictions. It's all about restrictions. restrictions to prevent wrong entries. Now, data validation is important because it prevents unnecessary errors, ensures high quality and useful data, and builds trust within worksheets and reports. So once there's validation, you know that the data is accurate. Okay, so let's look at what validation really is. In Excel, there are various types of validations, and I want us to go through the various types and see how they work. Over here, we are going to complete a form and we are going to apply validation to all the entries over here. Right now, there are no validations, but we are going to apply them. To apply validation, you need to select the cell where you want the validation to be applied, and you move to the tab called the data tab. Please, have you seen this tab? And under data, you move to data tools. We have something here. I don't know if you've seen this before. Under data tools, okay, so under data tools, that is it over here, and when you put your mouse on it, it just tells you data validation. Let me read what the message says and we will use it. Okay, so it says that data validation: pick from a list of rules to limit the type of data that can be entered in a cell. For example, you can provide a list of values like 1, 2, and 3, or only allow numbers greater than 1,000 as valid entries. So data validation is about creating valid entries. Let's see how it really works. You can click on the arrow here, or you can just click on the button over here for data validation. Let me click on the arrow here and I'll see 3 options here. We will go through all these 3, but the main tool is this, the data validation tool we've been talking about. That is it over here. Remember the icon? This is how the icon looks like, and that is it here. So you just have to click on it. When you click on data validation, it will show a dialog box, and this dialog box is called data validation. And what it does is that it gives you 3 different tabs. The first tab is called settings, second tab is input message, and the third tab is what we call error alert. We will start by looking at the settings tab. And now, working with the settings tab, we need to define a validation criteria for the cell we selected. Remember, we selected a cell before coming here. This data validation is applied to cells. So if there's a specific cell you want to apply it to, you need to select it first. If you want to select it to a group of cells, highlight all of them first before you come here. If you want to apply it to the entire worksheet, then highlight every cell before you come here. Now, when you come here, what you discover is that something is already allowed. Can you see here? Please, can you see here? Something is already allowed. What is allowed here? Any value. That means there is already data validation in all the cells, but the type of validation in the cells currently is what we are seeing here, any value. Because Excel doesn't want to restrict you from the beginning, they allow you to input any value. Data validation is all about telling the cells the type of input to accept. Right now, there is a validation already in our cells, but the validation is an open one, and it says any value. That is why when you enter any value, it works. So what we are going to do now is to change the any value to what we want to restrict the cell to, because everything over here, what we see is what? Allow. So what are we going to allow in the cell we have selected, or the group of cells we have selected? That is what we are going to do. All right, so let's look at the types of validation in Excel. We have whole number validation, we have decimal validation, we have list, we have date, we have time, text length, and custom. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and don't forget this is also a validation, 8, any value. Let me try one of them for you to see. For example, because the cell I selected is under country, the user is supposed to fill a form and is supposed to enter the name of a country. But what we want to prevent is that when you ask people to type countries, they will type the countries in different ways. Someone typing Ghana will use small g, small h, small a, small n, small a. Someone will use capital J, capital H, capital. They will all type it in different ways. And if we make it so open, people will type and it will be in different forms. And if we want to analyze them or use them for analysis, sometimes even when we search, we may not get a result because they were typed in different forms, and some of them will bring spaces before typing, some of them will put extra characters in them, and we may not even find it when we perform a search because they didn't type it directly as we want. So what we are actually going to do in this country cell is to give a list of countries that are allowed. We are going to provide a list of countries that are allowed. Now the list of countries that are allowed will all be listed in a certain way. So all you have to do is to choose one of them or type one of them. Let's see how that works. So over here, the type of validation we want to use is a list. We have to provide the source. If you choose other types of validations, you need to provide the data. With this list, we don't need to provide any data, we just need the source. Now the source can refer to a different worksheet that has a list of allowed countries or the list that is allowed, or you can enter it in directly. So for example, we can type Ghana, comma, Nigeria, comma, Gambia, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Benin, and Niger. Okay, I think it's okay. So you can create your own lists by using comma to separate the source values. Now when I click OK, I have applied validation to that cell. What will happen is that first of all, no one is allowed to enter a country that is not in our list, first of all. And secondly, you can either choose the country from this drop down. Please, can you see this drop down? Or whatever you type. Let's say I type Ghana in a different way. Alright, so because of how I type Ghana, you see it's giving me an error. Let me cancel it and explain this again. Because of the list validation we applied, whatever you enter must be within this list. So you can either select from here. This is one of the most popular validations that are used or that is used in Excel, and it also helps you to create a drop down list. Whenever you want to create a drop down list anywhere in Excel, this is how you do it. Whether you are thinking about data validation or not, you have to use a data validation tool to create your drop down list. So this helps us to prevent wrong entries. Let me give you an example. Someone comes here and they enter a country like, that's Morocco. Watch this. When you hit enter, because Morocco is not in our list, you are going to get an error. It says that this value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell, because there is a data validation restriction defined for the cell and this value doesn't match it. So you either try again by typing something else. So let's say you type Iran. When you type Iran, you are going to get the same error. Let me cancel. Try again. Let's type a country like Japan. Error. Why are we getting errors? It's not in our list. Good. So if I come here and I type, let's say Benin, did it accept it? It accepted it without an error. There's no error anywhere. There's no error anywhere. It accepted it. If I come here and instead of Benin I type, let's say Nigeria, it accepted it without an error. There's no error anywhere. So the validation has restricted it. If you use list, your restriction is even stronger. Nobody can type anything that is not in this list or in the format of this list. So you can type like the way I typed here. If I want Burkina Faso, I can type it, it will work. I can also use the drop down list to choose the country I want. This is data validation. Let's try another type of validation here. Over here, you are supposed to enter an employee code. And this employee code is not supposed to exceed 5 characters. It's not supposed to exceed 5 characters. That is the validation we want to put in. So we go to the data tab, we click on data validation, and we define the criteria. Let's change the criteria to test length. Over here we need to describe the data we want to use. The data simply says between, not between, equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Alright, I think I want to use less than or equal to, and over here I'll enter 5. That means the validation I am creating or the restrictions I am placing on this cell is to check the length of the test. That is what I am defining right now. And when it checks, the instruction says it should be less than or equal to 5. That means the test length is 5. Is that clear? We can say between. And when you choose between, you have to provide a minimum and a maximum. So between, you can put 1 and 5. That means between 1 and 5. If you enter anything between 1 and 5, it will work. But actually, for the employee code, they are 5. And they have to be 5. So we are only going to allow 5. So we can even choose equal to and enter the length 5. That means if you enter anything that is not 5, it will not work. So by using the data drop down here, you can define how you want it to be. So let's choose equal to 5 and click OK. So when we come to employee code, let's say employee code is E1234. Enter. It has accepted it without an error. But if you come here and you say employee code is E1, you are going to get an error. Please, are you with me? You are going to get an error. All right. Let's put in another validation here. And over here, employees are asked to enter their names. if we don't place restrictions in this particular cell, someone may go and enter a number by mistake, or someone may not enter the name right. So we can describe any type of validation we want to put here. Either we limit the text length so that you cannot type beyond a certain length, or we restrict this cell to accept only text. No number should appear here. Only text is allowed, or only text should be allowed. So that's what we want to do. We want to allow only text. All right, so we select the cell, go to data validation, and we choose our criteria. In this list, I don't see anything like only text. That is where the custom comes in. This custom is an open category that can be used to create any dynamic validation, so long as you know how to use functions. If you know how to use functions, you can use custom to even define all of this, or any validation that you want. So if you want to be more creative or more dynamic or advanced, you need to use a custom criteria here. Now custom is asking you for a formula, so we need to provide a formula. The formula I'm going to provide is this. Remember, to use any formula you need to begin with the equal sign, and I'm going to enter a formula that says a function that says is test. Now is test, I need to open the parentheses and come and pick the name of the cell. So close my parentheses, and what this means is that whatever is in cell B5 is test. After putting this here, when I click OK and I come here, let's say someone types number 12, we get an error because 12 is not text, right? But someone comes here and enters a name like Samuel Gray. Did it pick it? It accepted it. So it only accepts text. Over here I use a function and I use the custom validation. Now the custom is an open validation that can be used for any validation you want. The only limitation is your ability to use functions in Excel. Let me come here and show you the formula, the function I use. We said the function is called is text. You see that it's part of Excel functions, and what it does is that it checks whether a value is a text, returns true or false. So when we say it is text, we are telling Excel that it is text. There's another function that is called is number. You see this is number. We can use that to perform a restriction. ID number, we can go to validation, and over here we can select. When it comes to number, is much easier. You can use whole number here as your validation and it will work perfectly. You can use decimal here if it has fractions in it, or decimal places in it, or you can still use custom. Instead of choosing the whole numbers, you can just use a custom, and under formula you can come and use a function called is number, into brackets the name of this cell, and you close it. So when I click OK, I have applied the validation here. The validation simply means a restriction. So I've placed a restriction here. ID number, if you forget ID number and you come and you type your name Samuel, you are going to get a big error because there is a validation in that cell. That validation only requires what? A number. So we have instructed the cell not to accept any text or anything else apart from numbers. So let's say your ID number is 202, enter, and it works. This is okay. All right, let me change the alignment to left, home, align, left. Okay. Access level. This access level works between 1 and 5, and you need to enter yours. If you work in certain companies, your access level to be able to access certain information in the company will be based on the number you have. Some people have level 5, some people have level 2, some people have level 1. It depends on the level. So we want to place a restriction here that will only accept between 1 and 5. So we select this, we go to data validation, and we define our criteria. The criteria we will use here is whole number, and here we need to use between. We can use not between, we can use equal to, we can use not equal to, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. This time we want to use between because access level in this company is between 1 and 5. So minimum 1, maximum 5. When you click OK, you have defined a validation for this cell, and this one does not bring any drop down. No information is given to you unless we intentionally provide you a clue of what you are supposed to enter. But then if you enter anything like 7 and you press enter, you have an error. If you enter 0, you press enter, you have an error. If you enter 90 and you press enter, you have an error. That means Excel is not accepting your entry. This is good because sometimes you really want to place restrictions. Like the first example I gave, if there is a worksheet that has a lot of financial values and other calculations depend on them, it is good to restrict them so that nobody enters the wrong thing even by mistake, and the restriction is left to you. You will define your own restriction. Here the restriction we've given is that it has to be between 1 and 5. When I enter 78, I'm still getting an error. Who can tell me why I'm still getting errors? Yes, please. Restriction. So what are we supposed to put in? 1 to 5. So you are only allowed to enter numbers between 1 to 5. If I enter 3, will it work? Enter. It picked it immediately because it falls within the restrictions. Let me align this to left. Home, align left. All right.
So that one too, we can use the list method also.
You can use the list method as well. I just want to try and take you through the various options. Now we have another one here that says we have training date, right? And this training date should not be any day before today. Excel should not accept any date before today. If you are registering for a training, you can't be trained yesterday or last week. Is it possible? You are filling a form, you are supposed to enter the date you want to start your training, and you type yesterday. It's not possible. So we want to restrict dates. We are doing this because data validation can also restrict dates. So let's see how that works. So you go to your data tab, you go to data validation, and the validation you use here is date. Now date can be between, date can be not between, date can be equal to, date can be not equal to, date can be greater than or less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. I think I'm going to use greater than or equal to. And over here, the start date, Excel has an inbuilt function that defines certain dates. For example, if you enter today in and bring two parentheses, it means today, and it means today's date. So I'm saying that the date should be what? Greater than or equal to today. So you can't enter any date before today. Let's try it and see. Okay, so training date. What is today's date? 23rd what? October 2021. Did it pick it? It accepted it. If you want to be trained on 25th October 2021, it's going to work. But let's say you want to be trained last week. Last week was what date? 18th October 2021, and you have an error. Let's try another validation. The next validation here, we are seeing registration fee, and what we want to restrict over here are decimal places. We want to say that whatever you enter here must be left in 2 decimal places. In this particular cell, I want to apply the decimal validation. The decimal validation works like the whole number validation. Do you remember the whole number validation? Okay, it works like the whole number validation, which only accepts whole numbers. With whole numbers, if your number has a decimal, it will reject it, no matter the number you enter or no matter the criteria you define. If it is not a whole number, it won't take it. Over here, the decimal accepts both whole numbers and decimals. So if you are accepting values and decimals are included, you can't use whole number. Let's say you are taking registration fee and you allow people to enter the registration fee. Some people may have 50 pesos or may enter numbers with decimal places. Now you have to apply validation to that cell so that nobody will enter text or something strange. The decimal validation accepts numbers, but it includes decimals or decimal places. It is just like the whole number, but the whole number does not accept anything with decimal. That's the difference. So let's define validation for the registration fee. To do that, you go to your data tab, data validation, if you are not there already, and over here you need to drop down and choose decimal. Remember, decimal is just like whole number, but it also makes room for decimal numbers. Whole number accepts numbers based on the definition you give, but it never accepts anything with decimal places. So if the cell will ever require or will ever receive decimals, then don't choose whole number, you should use the decimal. All right, now this particular decimal, we are going to select greater than. Let's use greater than. So let's say it has to be greater than 50. Greater than 50. Let's define it this way. I'm only doing this because you can choose any option you want over here for your definition. So we are saying greater than 50. When you click OK and you come here, registration fee can be 70, it will accept it. Can be 80, it will accept it. Can be 100, it will accept it. Can be 70.50, it will accept it. Can be 50.50, 25, it will accept it. Can be 100.75, it will accept it. Based on the definition we gave, it will not accept anything less than 50, because we said it should be greater than what? 50. So even if you enter 50, it's not going to work, because it says it should be greater than what? 50. Please, are you following? Okay, good. Now if you come here and you enter 45.5, it's not going to accept it. When you enter 30, it's not going to accept it, and the reason is the validation is very specific. Whatever you type here should be greater than 50. We don't care what it is, but so long as it's greater than 50, we are okay. Now when you choose greater than 50, it can be with decimal or not, it will work. The difference between this validation and the whole number is that the whole number does not accept any decimal place. Let me take it again. Those two validations, they accept numbers, but the whole number is extra specific, because it will accept numbers but will not allow any decimal. So if the validation you want to set may include or will include decimal, don't use whole number, but just use a decimal. For example, you just want to say less than 50. Now this less than 50, let's say we want to define less than 50 here, right? Let's go to data validation, and let's say we make a mistake and we choose whole number and we say less than 50. Please, you see this? Good. Now we are saying less than 50 here. If I type 45, it will work. If I type 30, it will work. If I type 49, it will work. If I type 49.5, it has to work, right? But it's not going to work. If I type even 20.5, it's not going to work. Why? Because of the type of validation we selected. Even though you said less than 50, 20.5 is not a whole number. So if you select the whole number validation, please, are you here? If you select the whole number validation, even though you are saying less than 50, if it is not whole number, it won't work. And so if by selecting less than 50 you mean any number less than 50, then don't use whole number as your validation. Instead, you should use which one? You should use which one? You should use the decimal as your validation, because they do the same work, just that the decimal will also allow what? Decimal places. So I will come back here, go to data validation, and instead of whole number I will use decimal, and I'll say less than 50. This is okay, less than 50, it will work, because if I enter 49.5, it's less than 50. If I enter 30.99, it's less than 50, it has to work. So if you intend to allow anything less than 50, then don't use whole number, because whole number will restrict it to whole numbers, unless of course that's what you want. Is that clear? All right, so right now our registration fee is less than 50, so anything less than 50 will work. Let me align it to the left, home, left, and lastly let's put in the start time. When I finish with this, you are going to do the same thing for me right now. All right, so start time, let's say the program starts at 8 a.m. so we want to put a restriction here that will allow a time. So we click here, go to data validation, and we select time. Okay, time can be between. Let's use between. We can use not between. Okay, let's use not between and say that not between start time 8 o'clock p.m. and 5 o'clock a.m. What this means is that not between. When we say not between, what does it mean? When we say not between, it should not be within that range. That means anything outside the range will work, right? What if we use between? It has to be within the range. Excellent. So let's try this and see. Oh, sorry. They said the end time must be greater than or equal to the start time. Well, what they don't understand is that, okay, so let me say let's just use 8 to 11:59.
8 p.m. So I think the start time should be there. No, it can still be 8 p.m.
Okay, what we are defining here is not between. Okay, let's use between to make everything simple. So it has to be we work between 8 a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m. So it has to be between this. Okay, so this is clearer. So okay, it works. So if you come and you choose start time like 9:30 a.m., it works. If you come and you choose start time like 5 o'clock a.m., you have an error. Please, you get it? Excellent. So I want you to design this for me right now, and I will take you through the other tabs. So just use few minutes and design this. It won't take you any time. Sometimes you want to give an instruction or an information about how the input should be done, because sometimes when the users start entering data, they have no idea of the expectation of the validation, and sometimes when they get error messages, they do not know why they got those errors, and if there is no instruction, they will be totally confused as to what to enter. For example, there was a cell that asked for numbers between 1 and 5. If the users have no idea that the text should be numbers between 1 and 5, and they keep getting errors, how would they ever know that they have to enter text between 1 and 5? Please, are you following? So sometimes when we are using validation, we can provide instructions. That is what we want to do next. Let me use the access level as my first example. I'll go back to data validation, and this time I'm moving to the second tab that is called input message. Please, are you here? I'm moving to the second tab called what? All the work we've done, or all the work we did before, were done under what? Settings. Right now we need to work under this input message. So that is what I want to show you. Input message, how it is done. With the input message, we can go back to our validation, and remember all the validation we gave are still within the cell. or are still defined. So you click on the input message. Under the input message, you are able to give a title and an input message. You can choose to ignore the title or add a title, but the input message is compulsory. The input message here is not compulsory, but it's important if you want to give any input message. The input message here right now is saying it's about providing instructions. So we can come here and say that please enter, or just please enter values between 1 and 5. Please, have you seen what I have here? I'm not going to add a title, but I'll come back later and add a title and we'll see the difference. So when I click OK, remember I selected the cell called access level, right? Now when you are in any other cell, you don't see any instructions, but when you get to access level, immediately you click there, something will pop up. Please, do you see something? It will pop up and tell you that please enter values between 1 and 5. The purpose of the input message is to give a tip to, or a clue to the user, so that the user will know what is expected of them. Let me add a title and it will make it much clearer. I'll click on the same cell again, go back to validation, data validation. I'm on the second tab called input message. Let me give a title here and type instructions, and I'll click OK. And now when the person selects a cell, at least it comes with a title, so the person understands what this message is. This message is called the input message. Let's try another input message. Over here under the country, what kind of instruction do you think we can give to our users to make it easier for them to understand what we expect from them based on the validation we have entered into this particular cell? Give me a message to tell them. Please select from the list, right? Okay. All right. So watch this. So we go to data validation. Remember, the settings will remain. Remember the settings we gave, they are still there intact. Input message, let's give a title and say instructions or instruction. Please select from the list. Please select from the list. That's an instruction. Okay, you know what, after instruction, let me add some column here to make it look more attractive. So here, when the person gets there, he has an instruction. Please select from the list, so that the person has a clue. And if the person makes a mistake and they get an error, at least they will understand the error they got. Let me change this to instruction again. So I'll go back to the same place. Input message, we'll say instruction. I'll use a column and it's edited. That's fine. Okay. Let's provide input message for employee code. Employee code input message. Over here, apart from typing instruction, you can give any title, or if you don't want a title, so you can ignore it. So we can say tip, and let's say that, okay, so based on the validation we gave, this is a validation we gave, text length should be equal to 5. So we are just giving a tip that, let's just say your input should be 5 characters long. This is an instruction or a tip. So when you do that, you get the input message. Please, is it clear to you? Okay, so please enter the input message for these three, for a number of them, 1, 2, or 3, and then let's continue. All right, so let's move on to the last tab. All right, so I'm going to select the first cell here, and I'm going to go back to data validation. So data validation, and we have a last tab over here. If you can see, we have our last tab here, and this last tab is called error alert. Please, can you see this? It's called what?
Error alert.
That is what we are going to do. All right, now to apply the error alert, let me just explain it before we apply it. Error alert simply means providing an understandable error message. Now, when you come to, for example, country code, and you enter a country like Zambia, we have Zambia in our list. Okay, we don't have Zambia. Now, if you don't have Zambia, this is an error they give you. Or if you make a mistake, if your entry does not follow the validation, this is the error message they give you. The error alert tab allows you to enter your own error message, direct message to the user. So instead of receiving this default error message, you can put in a message that you think is more related to the validation. Okay, let's try it. So I'll select the cell, go back to data validation. Under error alert, there are three options or three inputs. The first one is a style, and what style do you see here? Stop here is really interesting because this is the command that blocks people from every wrong entry. So the stop is the main action here, and most of the validation we've been doing, they are all controlled by the stop. Later we'll come here and change it to warning and information. But stop, what it means is that stop will not accept an error. Let's provide an error message. I'm going to ignore the title, but I'll come back and put a title. Now, under the country, we want to give an error message instead of the default one and say that you have entered the wrong country or country name. We can choose to add more information or not. Please select from the list. So whatever you want to show, you type it under error message. So let's click OK and come here and make a mistake. Even though we have an instruction, we can have a message for errors. So let's say we get an error like we have a country like Spain. Enter. Okay, look at the message. The message said you have entered the wrong country name. Please select from the list. It can be any message at all. Let me change the message for you to see. I'm going back there. I'll select the cell, go back to validation, error alert, and type a message here. And type access denied. Over here we type Iraq. What does it say? Access denied. Well, okay, so if you are not part of the list, you can't register for this course. So whatever message you want to give, let me change the message. We'll say that this country is not, or we can say registration is not allowed in your country or from your country, something like that. All right, so when you come here and you make a mistake like, let's say Turkey, registration is not allowed in this country or in your country. Do you get the idea? The idea here is that the error message that will be given, you can control it. Okay, now over here we see, what do we see here? Microsoft Excel. I want to change what will show here as well. So let's come here and say that title, instead of Excel, I'm going to put Agape Harvest Institute under title and click OK. So when someone comes and enters a country like Egypt, you see the title has changed and the message has changed. So error alert gives you control over the error title, the error message, and over here it's about the type of error. It's about the type of error. Kindly apply this. I'm giving you just 2 minutes. Apply this, then we'll control the type of error. All right. So now let's control the style of the alerts. Let's control the style of the alerts. We'll be finishing very, very soon. Okay. Is it working? Okay, good. Now let's control the style of the alert. Now this particular alert is the stop style, and you can use an icon here to tell the type of alert you are using. The stop means if someone makes an error, don't accept any error. Don't accept any error. So with the stop style, there is no way you can force an input that is not in the validation. But what I want to say is that there are other error styles that will allow you to get a warning of the error you are making, but still be given the choice to decide whether your input should be accepted or not. Okay, let me explain that again. There's another one that can give you a warning that you are making a mistake. Do you want to go ahead and enter what you are entering? That's a different type of error message. And with that one, when you select yes, it will put in the error information. So it depends on the kind of information you are taking. Sometimes you think it should be in a certain range or it should be in a certain form, but maybe it is not really, or something else may also be correct. So the person will be informed, but the input can be accepted as well. And there's another one called information. The information one will only give the information that you've made a mistake, but it will accept whatever input the user input. So let's try that. Let me use Samuel Gray. Watch this. Samuel Gray. Sorry, employee name. I'm using employee name. I'll come to data validation. Under error alert, I'm going to change the style to what? Warning. And this is the icon for warning. Do you remember the icon for stop? This is what we've been seeing. Now we are going to use warning. Warning, let's give a title. Let's say we have IT masterclass. So we have this IT masterclass. Let's put it here. And we say that you have entered a wrong name. Look at the error message we are giving to the person. You have entered a wrong name. Watch this. When we select OK, and someone comes here and says that he is called, let me put something here, 30. Okay, fine. Now 30 does not follow the validation we gave. Now the error message, do you see this thing here, the icon? This icon is different from the first one, the stop one. This one says you have entered the wrong name. This is the message I put in, right? And this is the title I gave. But what do you see here? It's a question. Do you want to continue? That means should we still allow you to put in this? You can select yes. And when you select yes, even though the entry is wrong, it's going to accept it. Please, have you seen it?
Okay.
Good. So that is what the what's the name?
Warning.
The warning does. Please, are you here?
So what it means is that one is flexible.
It's flexible. It will give a warning, but give an option to the user to include it or not. Let me leave it in. Now, over here we are saying that access level here, and we said they should enter between 1 and 5, right? Let's go to the error message. In the error alert, let's change the style to warning. And by changing the style, you are changing a lot. It's like the validation we are entering, you are changing the style of the validation altogether. So this one does not restrict too much, but warns. Let me put here again IT masterclass, and under error message we will say that this level is unknown. If the person makes an error, this level is unknown. Let me just put it that way. So someone comes here and the person types level 7, enter. We have an error because the validation there said from 1 to what? 5. Now someone has come to enter 7 and the error has come, but the person is given the opportunity to keep it or not. So do you still want to continue? Yes. When you select yes, it will take the 7 even though the 7 is not allowed or is wrong. It's not in the validation. All right. Let me apply another style for you to see. Like registration fee. Let's go there, validation, and change the style to the last one called information. Information is the most flexible one. Information does not stop anyone. It only tells you that you made a mistake. So let's put IT masterclass as title, and information, we are working in registration fee. Okay, so registration fee should not be less than 50. Let's just put it there, 50. Okay, so now registration fee, someone comes and types 90. You see this one, it says registration fee should not be less than 50. Do you see the icon it brought? It doesn't stop the person. You can just say okay, and it has taken the 90. So that one is the most flexible. It will give an information but will accept it. So it depends on the spreadsheet you are working on. There are some works, even though you want to put a validation, you still want to be flexible. So if that is the case, you can use a flexible one, but if the error is unacceptable, you use the stop. Now by putting in this, let me show you something beautiful in Excel. Please watch this. When you come to data validation, you see that we have an arrow here, and what do you see here? Circle invalid data. Once you select this, Excel will go through all your work, and wherever a wrong entry is found, Excel will circle it for you. Do you remember that all these entries here are not valid based on our validation? Yes, but we accepted them anyway. Sometimes if you have a large data set and there are a number of errors within them that do not conform to the validation, you can go here and tell Excel to point them out to you. The data sheet may be very big, so you may not remember where the errors are. Excel can highlight all of them like this and you will see them. Please, can you see? Good. Then the last option here says that, what does it say? Clear validation circles. This one simply removes the circle and gives you the data again. So by doing this, we have tackled everything in data validation. If there are more to data validation, then they are within the custom validation, because the custom validation is dynamic and you can define your own validation as you get more experience in Excel. So this brings us to the end of this lecture.